Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar introducing K4 version 6.5. My name is Mark Walter, and together with Dina Gagliardi and Bruce Frausto, I will be your host over the next hour as we show you why we're excited by this significant upgrade to K4 from vjoon. Our purpose in this session is to provide an overview of some of the key new features being introduced to K4. Some of you may have seen a preview of this last November in Philadelphia at the ProPub Summit, when the CEO of vjoon, Andreas Schrader, gave a sneak peek of things that vjoon had in the lab at the time. The features that Andreas showed then are now part of this 6.5 release, which MEI recently certified as ready for release to customers in North and South America. We wanted to provide an overview to all of you, whether you saw the preview last fall or not, and give those of you who are K4 administrators an opportunity to invite others within your organization to a briefing that we hope will assist you in your K4 planning. We are recording the event so that if you want to be able to replay it afterward or invite colleagues who are not able to attend live to view it afterward, you'll be able to do so. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. First, when we switch over to presentation mode and Dina starts presenting, you'll notice that we have a Q&A pod to the right of the share window. To minimize background noise of having over 50 people in the audience, we've disabled audience microphones. However, we do want your questions. Please use the Q&A pod to enter questions at any time. Bruce and I will be monitoring these as Dina presents, and we'll do our best to address all the questions in the Q&A time at the end. Second, at the top of the share window, you'll see a full screen button. This may be helpful to you when we enter the live demo, especially if you are in a conference room connected to a projector, as it will enlarge the presentation area on your screen. So let's get started. Dina is going to share her screen. Today's program is broken into four main parts. The first will take 30 to 40 minutes. Dina will walk through the key features, showing both their benefit for end users and an overview of how the features are controlled by administrators. After that, Bruce and I will fill you in on the technical requirements, the results of his group's testing, reports in the field from customers who have already installed it, and the status of issues that were raised. I'll briefly mention vjoon's plans for the remainder of 2013, and then we'll devote as much time as we need at the end to answering your questions. For our first segment, let me turn the controls and the microphone over to Dina.
Thank you, Mark, and hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. There is a lot to what's new in 6.5, and so much that there is too much to show everything. So we'll be focusing today on several key areas. And for each of these, I'll give you a quick summary here on the slide deck, and then we'll move over to a live demo to show you how they work in K4. So the first segment is all about improving the user experience. With new capabilities, flexibility, and control, so let's go ahead and move into the live demo. So in K4 today, we have the ability to view objects through query panels in the preview mode. But now in K4 6.5, with the introduction of thumbnail view, within InDesign, InCopy, and Web Editor, query results can be shown as a preview whether they are text, image, or even a layout. And what's more is you can navigate in the hierarchy of an object to further refine those results. And that's all within the thumbnail view. And I know many of you will like this feature to get those results faster through that visual identification. So the query that I have open here to begin with is currently in list view, which many people are familiar with using. So I'll go ahead on the fly out and move over to thumbnail view. And thumbnail view can be set as a display setting for your query. So that may be something that you can think about in your implementation. So you can see as I move over to thumbnail view that we have our picture previews off here on the right-hand side, and we have our object data column off on the right. By selecting a layout, in this case we're using a query here for print layout, that object data associated to that layout is then shown in the object column. And further than that, we can go ahead and filter using the filter column. And for example, here we will do a filter on design layout to further refine those results on the query, looking at what layouts need to be designed. So this tells me that there are 5 layouts with that task that need to be are ready to be worked on. And by unchecking the filter, we then return back to the full results of this query. So you may be wondering, well, how do I navigate in an object? And simply by rolling over the object, you'll see that on each of these layouts here, we get a pop-up of 2 button choices. So the first one is being able to preview that layout in a larger view. And by clicking, we come back to our query result. And then there's the navigation. So the second button that we can choose is the navigation inside this particular layout. So here we can see all the thumbnail results viewed. Of course, we have the layout first, and then we have images available. And lastly, we have a text object or article. And the article is displayed with the 4 text objects displayed as the picture, so it gives you a sense of what that article is in a textual manner. So let's go ahead and navigate back out to our full query. And working within thumbnail view has that benefit of a faster search based on visual identification, whether it be for reviewing, placing images, because now you could just grab that image out of the query panel and pull it directly to your page, or even for finding content. So let's look at another example. I'm going to change our query here to our current issue for art, for example. And then we'll go ahead to the filter column, and let's go at this time and we'll search on the status. In this case, let's look for all photos that have been submitted. And on that return are 5 results. So I know that perhaps in the last week, these 5 new photos were submitted, and it allows me to perhaps even come out of a design meeting and find out, well, what's available to me that even could be coming out of a repository, or what images have been loaded into K4. So it's very easy to use that filtering within your thumbnail view to really help you get to the assets that you're looking for.
That's great, Dina. I can imagine that the designers really will appreciate, particularly for finding artwork. We could always do it by name, but now being able to see whether it's the images assigned for a chapter, for a section of a magazine, or whatever, being able to assign it to a query so that I can have basically pre-done queries where I know I'm looking for images and be able to basically see that set and even just drag the image right onto the page right from there.
That's absolutely true, Mark. So another area, or another function of the user interface that's been enhanced is filtering. So there are now more options to what you can filter on, and it's basically any field that has a text attribute. So let's take a look at that. I've flipped over back to a list view here, and I've turned on filtering. And let's go ahead and do a search on a status here for layout created.
Now this will be particularly helpful. In this example, the list itself was short enough that everything was shown there, but where you have a ton of articles or a ton of images, items where you might have 50 of them scrolling way off the bottom of the palette, the filter lets you winnow down quickly, just like Dina's shown here.
Absolutely. And you may have noticed while we're here working in the filters that the button bars have actually changed as well. And you may be familiar that the organization of those button bars has been static. So new to version 6.5 is the ability to customize these buttons. And they could be done in queries or attachment panels. And for example, they could be designed for a particular role, or if you're interested in removing a button because in your workflows there's buttons that are just never used, you have the ability to do that. So let's just take a look at some examples. What you're looking at currently is actually a button bar designed for a set for designing. And the users, while these are defined in the admin tool, the users can select their user preferences in the panel and actually change that button bar. So we can go back to the default in the system, or, for example, choose another option that's been made available. So let's go ahead and put this back to a default so that you can see that change. And there we're back to our default button. So it's very easy to build these customized button sets, and they're available right away to the end user, who can then switch those button bars if they so need to do that. So not only is thumbnail view natural for layout and images, but it also can be utilized for editorial workflows. So let's continue looking at thumbnail view from an in-copy point of view. So I'll go ahead and open up our query here. In this case, we're looking at one that's pulling all of our articles. And if I go ahead and just move now and switch it to thumbnail view, all of our articles appear as what I described earlier, as it, instead of the image, you get a representation of the text object. So you can see the variety here of 2 objects or 6 objects, so you get the immediate identification of how many text objects are in this article, with a brief description actually pulling the text out of each of those text objects as well. And it acts the same, so no matter whether you're an in-copy, InDesign, or a web editor, the functionality of having the object data and the filter columns are the same. So while we're here in InCopy, let's go ahead and take a look at Revision Manager, because that, as prior customers using version 5 may have used that in that version, and now coming back in version 6.5, vjoon has reintroduced Revision Manager.
While Dina brings this up, this is you know, an often requested feature. Obviously, K4 manages your versions. The Revision Manager gives you an easy way to compare the current version that you might be working on with an earlier version of the article.
So by selecting, at this point you'll notice that I have no articles open, and just by selecting an article off the query panel and choosing history, there's the additional feature here of being able to select 2 of the versions. So let's go ahead and we'll select version 3 and version 5. And now I can choose the compare button, which will open up and activate the Revision Manager window. And you'll notice our first text object here, which is a headline. So it looking short, this is the first object in this article. And we're able to select by text object and go through and actually do a comparison of the changes. Let's take a look at this in another view, is actually by accepting the article, accepting the task here on the article, and then going once more back into history.
Let's compare it to an early one.
And let's take a version 2 and, or excuse me, version 1, and we'll take a version 5 this time, and we'll compare.
So we can see now what Dina's brought up is you get a way to step through each of the text objects and get a sort of, you know, strike through and underline sort of indication of the edits that have happened. And the ability as well to, if you were working on the current one, to basically bring forward, for a particular text object, you can bring forward an older version into the current one.
So let me just back out here, and I'm actually going to show you the additional way is comparing that current article that I have open. I'll go ahead off the history panel and actually just select one version. And what that enacts is that I'm actually comparing that current article I have open to an earlier version. And you'll notice the difference now in the comparison window that we have the ability to revert that change down on the bottom of on the panel on the left. So as I go through these changes one by one, I'm able to select in the second grouping, what those change comparisons are, and I can actually go ahead and revert that change. And this allows you to look backwards into your history right while you're in editing your content without having to step out into another mechanism to return and look back at the history of the corrections and perhaps then revert and put what you would like into your current article. So before we move on to our second segment here in the live demonstration, and I'll just go ahead and close this out, I'd like to now move over to take a look at K4 overview and some of the new features that have been added into K4 overview. So vjoon has added 3 new ways to sort your previews for better organization of the content. And we're already logged in here, and we already have a query running for our print layouts. And you'll notice that the default view of coming in here is that we're sorting on the first page number in the layout and sorting by number type. And for many of you, sorting by number may not apply because you may not use pagination during your creation of your publications. So an additional way to sort would be perhaps by object name. So let's go ahead and apply this sort. And let's take a look at this with our thumbnails on with the details. And you can see at the top the file name starts with an 05, so that's what's coming out onto the top here. And as I scroll down, you'll see that the object name here is how they're being sorted.
So that's, I know, a feature that many customers have asked for. They're not applying folios, particularly in magazines, during the process, but often using a naming convention for the layout itself. So vjoon's responded with this. If you use that naming convention like is shown here, where the name of the file begins with that page sequence, or you use some sort of alphabetical instead, now you can sort it that way and have basically your layouts in the order that will appear in the magazine right there in your overview.
An additional way for sorting that's new is based on status as well, and I think this is very exciting for many people who will be tracking pages and wanting to review pages on a status level. So let's take a look at the results of this sort. So you can see that we pulled the status here first of layout created, and if I continue to scroll down, be a little far down, we can see another status, the second status being layout design and ready on our chef article here. So it's a really great way to have that organization, and perhaps you need to come in and find out, well, what are the pages that have been created versus maybe I need to look at and focus on the layouts that need to be designed. So however you've created your statuses, it's very easy to use the overview now for getting a sense of the preview of how your content is being created and where you're at in your cycle. An additional view here option inside of overview now is actually as well to view your content in a DPS article structure. So this appears here at the bottom as an additional view button. And when I change that, and I'll just go ahead and make sure our variants are set for English, and let's also go ahead and hide our blanks. You can see that the representation now is in the view of what that DPS article structure looks like. So really giving you insight into what your articles will look like inside the folio and on your DPS apps as well.
That's really nice for people that want to, that are working in a tablet workflow, want to give other members of the team that maybe are not working in K4 every day a way to give a little bit of a preview before it's baked into the app.
So let's head back into PowerPoint for just a little bit here as we move into our second segment of the live demonstration. And it's all about simplified task workflow. So the second key area here being workflow. vjoon is introducing simplified task workflow as a new complement to the regular task-based workflow that has been standard with the product since the introduction of K4.6. The easiest way to think of these workflows is to say that they are status-based, and they can be very helpful in moving your content forward or backward in a workflow very quickly by just resetting its status. And this method is also useful when you have one or more people who work on a content at a status, but you really don't need to have that complex workflow that goes down into specific tasks at granularity, where multiple people might have multiple things to do to move an article from, for example, copy edit to ready for paging, or from a first proof to a second proof. But if you want, you can now choose not to worry about recording what tasks happen and just go ahead and set a new status when the content status changes. And lastly, for those of you who may have hesitated to move to version 6 because of a task-based workflow, now have the option of a simplified model. So in other words, your 5.9 workflows can be imported without change directly into K4 6.5. So let's go ahead and see this in action. So we'll step back now into InCopy, and I'm going to use a query here for what I've created a query for is just to pull me the results of what's been put into my simplified workflow. So I'll go ahead and accept the task on my simple article here. And by finishing the task, you'll notice that our dialog box has changed from what appears when we have a task-based workflow. So you see immediately that we have a status, and with the status we have a pull down, and it gives me all of the available statuses that I can change to. So we are at the beginning of the workflow, and in this example, let's say I do not need to copy edit. I've done the copy edit myself, and it could be for something like a self-serve piece or a marketing piece that I'm working on. And I really want to move it forward to that the article is ready. So I can go ahead and select that and jump it forward in my workflow because I know that the next status and task have been completed already. So I'll go ahead and do that, and we'll just say OK. And you can see here in our query that the task is now been advanced for prep for web, and the status is article ready. But likewise, what you've seen is I've just jumped something forward. Let's take a look at what it is to do the same, but move it backwards. So I have that availability, and you can see all the options. We can go ahead and move it back if we needed to, for example, rebuild the article over from scratch, and we needed to send this backwards and redo it. We're able to do that very quickly without a lot of intermediate and complex steps.
Woohoo! I'm sure that the audience there is appreciating that, and the applause meter seems to be off the charts here. I know that many people have been waiting for an easy way to skip steps in a workflow, move things backward and forward more easily, and this certainly enables that. So you want to have a particular type of workflow for a particular type of content, and you can then basically set up a very streamlined workflow for that. What Dean will show us now is you can mix and match these. You don't necessarily have to have all of the workflows be one or the other. Is that right, Dina?
That's correct. So what we're now in is, let's take a look here in the administration side and at this particular workflow. And you can see right away that there's a difference here in our simplified workflow being in the center. And off on the left-hand side, you can see a comparison of a task-based workflow. And you can see that within our simplified workflow that you can have automations can be applied. And you'll notice right away that the task and the status is combined into one. And that represents what simplified task workflow is that you'll always have the status and the task combined together and really only having sequential items one by one without extra statuses in between, for example. So you may be asking, as Mark said, do I have to have all workflows inside my publication be one or the other? And the answer there is no. You can incorporate where the need really best fits your workflow, your processes, where a simplified needs to be applied versus a task-based workflow. You could have, for example, something like an outside contributor workflow where you want to remove those complexities and provide an easy way to advance articles, for example, and move them back and forth in status-based.
Right. Things like press releases may get streamlined. Heavy-duty features may undergo extensive amounts of revision. If you want to have dependencies between different things, then you go to a task-based workflow. If you don't have the need for dependencies, then you can go to the simplified.
And the same is true for having parallel tasks. That would be attributed to utilizing your task-based workflow versus a simplified where those things would be restricted. And that's really based upon the simplified workflow model. So this is just one of the ways that flexibility is available and has been incorporated into the 6.5 release. Our training experts at NEI or your integrators can help you develop simplified task workflows to meet your needs. So let's go ahead and move on to our third segment here of the live demonstration, and I'll dip back into PowerPoint here for one more time for our live demonstration. And the third area and last area here I'd like to show you concerns the significant uplift that vjoon has given to its support for Adobe's digital publishing suite for tablet publishing. And as you know, DPS has been evolving rapidly, and vjoon has been working closely with Adobe to align Kforce DPS support with Adobe DPS capabilities and terminology. And at the same time, vjoon has been enhancing the value of using K4 to manage your tablet workflows, providing more control and opportunities for automation. And you'll see this in renditions and variants, as well as the support for multiple DPS accounts, which we know many of you will appreciate. So let's go ahead and take a look. So the enhancements around Adobe DPS really align more to configuration rather than items you will see on the user side, which I'll show you actually a little bit of both, but we'll focus here a little bit more on what you can see through the admin. And while not everyone in the audience will need to understand that, you'll be able to see the capabilities of the new addition. So everyone knows what a variant does. So if I need to create a Spanish version of my article, I would have a variant, of course, created for Spanish and be able to start a workflow for that variant on the client side. So what's new is a DPS variant, and you can see the 3 DPS variants that we have set up here, for example, appearing at the, near the top of the list. So if I'm creating an iPad edition, a Kindle and an Android, I have the option of selecting the orientation to be portrait, landscape, or both. Let's actually go ahead and look at that in the edit view of a variant. And you can see that orientation drop down with the choices. As well, a variant, DPS variant, could be assigned to a rendition, and we'll get to renditions in just a moment. So with one new aspect of variants in 6.5 being a DPS variant, another is actually designating a variant to an output channel or an issue. So let's just step back here into our workflow to take a look at what this is and what this looks like. So very often in workflows you have your print output, you have your digital output, and just to give you an idea, you now have that ability at your workflow level to specify the particular variants that you want for that workflow.
And for that output channel.
Yes, exactly. So you can see here that in our print output channel that we have specified the print variant, which of course makes sense. Let's go ahead and take a look at our digital output and on our variant tab. And you can see that the 3 iPad DPS variants, for the tablet editions are now selected to be attached to this particular digital output. So you no longer have to run that risk, and you may have done this as I have done it a few times, is to accidentally select the wrong variant upon starting a workflow. So you're really able to organize your variants and have control over where you would like to assign your variants, whether it be a regular variant for a language or, in this example as well, a DPS variant. And many publishers are uploading folios to different sources like Amazon and Adobe for specific devices, and K4 allows different Adobe ID accounts in different areas of the configuration. So for this, I'm actually going to step out of K4 admin here, and let's take a look at this in InDesign. And I'll go ahead and use a query for our tablet landscape, for example.
And for those of you that don't know, if you do use DPS, one of the big advantages of having K4 help you with this process is that it can use InDesign Server to upload these folios, basically have a robot do the uploading and you not have to sit there and wait for that to happen on screen.
So one of the new areas and options that have been added is the ability to upload DPS metadata. And you can see here I'm just doing a simple trigger independent automated task. And you can see now here at the bottom we have the ability to upload that DPS metadata. So what this means and how you may apply it is, for example, if you have a workflow inside InCopy with editorial who would be responsible for making sure that the metadata is updated and kept in sync with the content, they could be uploading and using this automation to upload that DPS metadata to keep that content in your folio and on your in your app in sync with what the metadata is as it changes in your in-process workflow.
And that can be happening if you have parallel people working on your layouts as you're preparing stuff for the tablet. So the metadata in K4 can be fed in, that shows up in your table of contents and so forth when you see the tablet edition, and the layouts themselves are being done by the designers and could be submitted when they're ready for proofing.
And so our last area here looking at Adobe DPS is to look at renditions. So for this we'll step back here into our admin, and you'll notice here in the renditions tab that we have set up 4 renditions. And you'll notice that the resolution aspect ratio of these devices are assigned, and that there's a format and a quality. So let's take a look at iPad Retina, for example. So you now have that ability to include an Adobe ID for a specific rendition, if that's something that interests you or you need that in your workflow, because you may have a different Adobe ID that you use for your Kindle versus your iPad creation and output. So renditions is really a way to bring that configuration of your different formats, keeping them separate, and being able to manage that efficiency in K4 admin. Where previously this was a K4 server configuration and it required more technical configuration on the server side, which means that now in the K4 admin you have more control and easier control over what your renditions are and how you may apply them, because you can also then within a variant, and we'll just quickly take a look here, you can assign your renditions to a variant. So when you start a workflow for a new variant, and it, for example, is your iPad, the two renditions that we want to create, one for iPad Retina and another one for our iPad 1.2 version, would be connected then to our variant workflow.
In the same way, some of you have different resolutions of your PDFs for proofing versus the PDF X1A for output. Now I can have digital resolutions for different types of devices and tie those into my variants, my specific variations of the layouts that I create for digital versus print editions. I can manage those in K4. Clearly, there's a lot of new functionality. For the techies in the audience, I just wanted to point out some of the changes under the hood. vjoon has updated the database certifications to work with more recent flavors of MySQL and Microsoft SQL Server. And for those running on Windows Server, you can now upgrade to Windows 2012 Server. On the Macintosh front, as many of you know, Apple has repeatedly withdrawn support for Java because of security concerns. This week, Oracle released a new version of Java 1.6 and 1.7 that Apple is certifying, and vjoon is in the process of testing with version 6.5. Two other points: vjoon has dropped support for Google Chrome on Mac clients. That affects the web portal and the overview. And for those of you that are already on 6.4, you can upgrade to 6.5 without changing XSLTs, as the export schema has not changed. Of course, the full details are in the release notes that come with the software. If you'd like to see those in advance, reach out to your K4 administrator. You K4 administrators out there, reach out to us via the support portal or your integrator. We'd be happy to send those out to you. Bruce, I know that the support team has been working with 6.5 for a number of weeks. What have you guys found?
Mark, our testing has been quite positive. vjoon released 6.5 R1 just before Christmas, and we began testing it in early January. After our testing protocols finished, we determined that there were 4 or 5 bugs that we found that we documented and posted back to vjoon, as well as to clients who were interested in doing the upgrade. None of these was a showstopper. They were all fairly minor and easy to deal with. The 6.5 R2 version was released last week. We've started to test that as well. Yesterday, vjoon released a small patch to the K4 server module, labeling that 6.5 R3, which we're also incorporating into our testing. At this point, judging from the number of bug fixes that were made in both R2 and R3, we're very hopeful that we won't uncover anything significant as we did with R1. And that being the case, we're hoping that we can give our approval fairly quickly. We're hoping to get that actually done by the end of this week or the end of next week at the latest.
But my understanding is we already have a few customers that have actually gone live with 6.5.
That's correct. With 6.5 R1, we've installed this version at 3 sites so far. One was a college newspaper. One was a small commercial publisher. One was a corporate publisher, and I'm sorry, there's another one just in the works right now, a fairly major magazine publisher, also in working with 65R1.
And we also, I think, some are undergoing some stress testing at some of the larger customers.
That's right. We've deployed R1 and now R2 to a number of the IT installations at our larger customers. So they're banging on it as we speak, and they're basically waiting for us to give the thumbs up on approval for deployment to production systems.
I'd like to just remind the audience that you can make a difference. We've been actively providing input to vjoon's product managers on customer requested features, and we encourage you to contact us with your requests. Mention them, whether it's to sales or support folks or your work with Dina. We've been feeding that on a regular basis to vjoon, and some of the things that you see in 6.5 are direct response to customer requests.